Hi, I'm on a mission to stop CEOs and high-flying leaders from hitting burnout and crashing. My name is Marian Bourne, and over the years, I've noticed how if you're a CEO or a high-flying leader, you are really good at looking after your business, your career, your family, your kids, even your parents, but you're not so good at taking care of yourself. And the problem is actually just one of awareness. All too often, the issue of stress isn't even recognized until a visit to the doctor reveals the price you have paid with your health. So my chapter is all about stress and the impact it has on every single area of life.
Okay, let's start our regular table. Welcome everybody to this regular table. It's about this book, Changing Conversation from a Changing World. And at every tables, we interview one of the author. And today we have the pleasure to have the author of the chapter number 13, which is about stress, with the title Stress Never Killed Anyone, Did It? And we're going to have a conversation with Marian Bourne, which is stress management, health and life coach in London, United Kingdom. Welcome, Marian.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. Yeah.
Cool.
Can everybody hear me, by the way?
Yes, it's clear. And before diving into the chapter, I'm always interested to have a bit of context. So my first question is, why did you write about stress? And what is the context of the topic of stress in your life?
Yeah, well, the reason I wrote about it was because I've been a practitioner for over 20 years, treating people with chronic health problems. And what I realized was that many people who came to my practice, still come to my practice, underlying their problem was stress that they had never managed, or worse than that they had never recognized. And so we would work on their health problem, which could be a gut problem, a back problem. And at some point in the sessions, I would ask them a question about their stress, and mostly people say they don't have any stress, because that's part of the problem. That's one of the reasons I wrote the chapter, because first of all, I had all these clients who suffered from stress and got ill from it, because I'm interested in the mind and body connection. And then the second thing is to bring awareness to actually recognizing stress, because we don't. And the third reason was to be very transparent. I have crashed and hit burnout, not once, but twice. And so I've got a very personal reason for sharing with people why I think stress is so underestimated and overlooked. You know, I've got my own experience to back me up as well. So there were three good reasons for why I wanted to write the chapter.
Yeah, so there's a lot of story behind this chapter.
Yeah, there is. And I think, and out of treating my clients and recognizing that stress was behind their illness, that actually took me into the world of then going into PTSD and trauma. And so, then I took my coaching into trauma as well. And so I'm trying to do various therapies around trauma as well, because if you've got something in your background in your childhood that, you know, has affected you, it's going to affect how you handle stress today. And I think that's actually what's happened for a lot of people with COVID at the moment. And there's something in the background. People find it even harder than they might do handling lockdown and everything, because all those childhood things have kind of come to the surface in lockdown and COVID. So yeah. So I started with physical things, and then I went to stress, and then I went to trauma, and somehow I try and put them all together.
And you've used the acronym PTSD. Will you define it for me?
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
So most people think that PTSD, you have to be a war veteran or you have to have had something terrible happen to you, but actually that's not the case. And it's now recognized that we have developmental trauma from really quite little things when we're children, but all those little things can add up. And yeah, there is this this diagnosis, if you like, of PTSD, but it doesn't have to be something major. You don't have to have been in a war zone. And I think working with a lot of people now recognize that they have this problem. So it's out in the open now. It's not something that's kind of hidden. People talk about it quite openly.
Yeah. Okay, I'm having the beginning of the chapter in my hand, and in the rectangle, there's this quote: "Conversations are not what we think they are," by Judith E. Glaser. Why this quote?
Yeah, I really like that quote of Judith, and she has another quote in the book, and it's something along the lines of, it's from a press conference, and the quote goes something like, "I know you believe you understood what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant." She writes that somewhere in the book, and I have always loved both of those things. And she has another quote, which is, "Words create worlds," and I've always loved that as well, because the words that we use are so powerful. The way that we say things to people, you know, there's another saying which I kind of slightly twisted, which is, "Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can really hurt me." And, you know, that starts off when we're children, because children take what we say very literally to them. And it's almost as if we bring those old movies of what we heard as children into our current lives today. And those old movies inform us in how we handle stress today. And it's really, yeah, you see this so obviously in children. You know, children who wake up on Monday morning with a tummy ache, they don't want to go to school. And that's the kind of mind-body connection. So yeah, words are just so important. So I love that quote, and as I say, I love the other quote about you know, not thinking, not knowing, not hearing what the other person intended to say to us. I just think it's so powerful and it's so true. And I think probably most of us can recognize, you know, we have conversations, we say something, but the other person hears it with a completely different meaning. So that's what one of the wonderful things I loved about what Judith put in her book.
Great. So we have some quote to think about.
Yeah. So that's why I put that at the beginning of the chapter. It just kind of sums up, yeah, lots of her wisdom. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into your chapter. At the beginning of the chapter, you start by talking about stress from a tiger and from a boss from hell, and the stress response. Then you talk about your interest in conversational intelligence and neuroscience to drive positive changes. That also comes up as well as stress hormones. Will you tell us more about all of these?
Yeah, this is a big subject. So basically, when I heard Judith talking about cortisol and stress and conversations, my ears just lit up. And the reason was because, well, I've just mentioned my clients and their stress. And so when you're facing the tiger, or when you have the boss from hell, you have the same response, which is a cortisol response. And that's one of the things that I work with in my practice. So I might talk to clients and I'll say, you know, how much stress have you been under? And most people will say, oh, none. There's this thing about not recognizing stress. And so what really interested me with Judith's work was was this whole concept of words we use. If you look in the book, there's the dashboard, and on the left-hand side of the dashboard is lack of trust, fear, and a cortisol response. And that just so tied in with the work that I do, because if you have excess cortisol, if you're living your life in stress every single day with high levels of cortisol, it damages your health. And I've just said, I'm really passionate about what goes on in our head is mirrored in our body. So if you have too much cortisol from the stress that you live with, it increases your blood pressure. You have high cholesterol. Cortisol is inflammatory, so it contributes to a lot of pain. Inflammation is now recognized as being the #1 cause of most degenerative diseases. Inflammation is at the root of it. And so Judith's work around cortisol and words is just, I just felt, oh wow, I belong here. Because, stress, I'll go back to cortisol. What else does, when you're stressed, but you don't always realize this. With stress, you put weight on. Why? From cortisol. Your immune system goes down. So when you're not functioning very well, you're much more susceptible to picking up bugs and things. Classically, you might go on holiday, really stressed. You go to this gorgeous island in the Caribbean, you get to see this fabulous beach and the blue seas, and you unpack your suitcase, and all of a sudden your back goes, and you spend the next week of your 2-week holiday on your back in your hotel, unable to move, because it's as if your body has said, oh, thank goodness, we can have a rest now. And so cortisol lowers your immune system, lowers your mood, your outlook on life. And so her work just spoke to me, basically. The opposite on the dashboard is to be with oxytocin and excitement and trust and everything. So that's really spoke to my work with clients and looking at how people respond when they're walking around with a lot of stress and high cortisol levels. And actually one of the things that I do, which I think we're going to come on to, but I very often will say to people, why don't we do a cortisol lab test? And they get a test kit sent to them. It's a saliva test, and they take saliva samples during the day. And this is proof, because they comes back and either their cortisol levels are off the scale or they might be on the floor. Either way, it's a result. And then finally, people have a visual context for what's actually happening to their cortisol. If people have got high levels at the end of the day, which is what the lab test will show, that can be a reason why people don't sleep at night. So this is proof to them that actually it's a good idea to switch off all your tablets, phones, etc., an hour before you go to bed. So I think people sometimes need to have that visible proof that they have stress, and this is a really simple way for them to find out and see it for themselves. Because very often when you talk to people, and when you dive a little bit deeper and start asking questions like, how many cups of coffee a day do you have? Or do you need coffee to wake you up when you get up in the morning? Lots of people do. They sleep so badly, they wake up feeling exhausted, and they need a couple of cups of coffee to get them going. And then they probably need more coffee later. That's just kind of one example. So I actually, in terms of stress, I like to look at lots of different factors, and obviously lifestyle things. And somewhere I quote the example, somebody taking work on holiday and sitting by the pool answering emails. That's not good for your health either. But it's so accepted now. And I think there's a badge of honor in London. There's a badge of honor, or there used to be, about, maybe it started with Mrs. Thatcher. I only had 4 hours sleep last night. Oh, well, I only had 3. And so stress is a kind of badge of honor that some people yeah, some people wear with pride. They can handle it, but ultimately their body pays the price. Nearly always. In fact, you can't get away without your body suffering at some level. Your body is always going to manifest what's going on in your head. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I liked one example you mentioned, resonate, is the fact about the people going on holiday and being ill. This pattern, I know it from the people working in hotelery. I had my parents working in this and some others. And there was this in-between season, and there was always ill between the in-between season or doing every doctor visit at that period. And recently I have the same pattern manifesting by some friends which are working in hospital, which are doctor. And when they go on holiday, they always have a sort of pain the first days. So it's, I have many examples of that pattern. Yeah,
absolutely. It's really, it's really, really common. You know, as I say, your body knows when you finally stop, and that's what happened to me. You know, I went through massive stress, personal stress, and finally, when I got to the end of it, I crashed. And I didn't realize it was stress at the time. It's a long time ago, but you know, we don't realize it unless we actually are taught to recognize that, yeah, this is a stressful situation and I need to manage it better in order to get through it. So yeah, my own personal story comes into that as well. Because I've been there, as they say, and you know, bought the t-shirt and yeah.
Yeah. If you continue in the book, after the you also illustrate the effect of stress, of emotional stress, with the case of Sally, which get diagnosed with the breast cancer. Will you explain that story to us?
Yeah. So this follows. So yeah, this follows on. So she was somebody who came to me. She had no energy. She told me that her hormones were all over the place. She really had no interest in life. And she told me that she had she sold her business and she had great relationship. She had no problems whatsoever, none. And over a period of time, we dived a little bit deeper. We did the cortisol test, and sure enough, it came back with some interesting results, which we worked on. And over time, I actually learned from her that although she'd sold her business for many millions, she'd made a lot of money. In the process of doing that, she had gone through a very, very stressful time, about maybe 5 years before I saw her, with people, I think, kind of, you know, sticking knives in her, not supporting her, doing some pretty unpleasant things to her in this process. So I think she had to sell her business. So even though she made a lot of money, it wasn't necessarily what she wanted to do. And so she told me about this, and some pretty nasty things happened to her. And so here we are 5 years on, and she said, yeah, but that's all in the past. And after I finished working with her, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she actually sent me an email and said, guess what? The first question my oncologist asked me was, what stress have you been under? And as a result of that, I mean, she's fine now. But she then went and I think she went and worked with a psychotherapist. But that was just such a kind of affirmation, if you like, that, you know, our body will always register what's going on in our head. And I have this kind of, I wish I could draw cartoons. You know, I think some people think of the body as being a taxi to carry your head around, to carry your brain around. And your body is such an integral part of the whole of you. We get very head centric. You know, we think everything happens in our head. We have heads of department, heads of companies. We think our brains are the controlling influence, but actually we are a whole body, and one of the things I work with people is actually for them to connect back into their whole body. You actually think from the body. I'm going into something else now. But this is a very good opportunity to bring up two books that I think everybody should read. One is by Gabor Mate, and his book is called When the Body Says No, or The Body Says No. And the other one is by they're both doctors, Bessel van der Kolk, and his book is The Body Keeps the Score. And they are both fabulous books. I think the entire planet should read them because they both talk about the connection between the body and the head. So they're just, I give them to everybody. I tell everybody to go away and read them. They're quite difficult reading for some people. If you had a lot of upset and trauma in your background, can be a little bit triggering. But the lovely thing is that you kind of then start to get some answers for maybe why you kind of react to things in the way that you do. So yeah, those are my two go-to books for absolutely everybody. I think it's fantastic reading. And that's kind of what happened to Sally. She had all the stress and her body reacted, got cancer. That's not always the case, but you know, there is this connection, and that's what I've always been interested in. Yeah.
Okay,
Does
so
that
the
give
two,
you a flavor?
yes, they give me a really good insight into the background of the story of Sally, and we've put the name of the two books with the name of the author in the chat box for the people to to note. And I'm wondering, we've talked about the effect of people coming, let's say, a bit too late or after the effect. And I'm wondering about the stress, the warning sign. Will you tell us more about any stress warning signs?
Yeah, so for lots of people who start to not feel ill, and usually these not feel well, rather, these are, you know, high functioning, high performing leaders who don't feel well, and they go to their doctor, and then they get diagnosed kind of out of the blue with, you know, high cholesterol or high blood pressure, and they suddenly discover that, you know, they've got to be put on pills for the rest of their life. So, you know, symptoms, those are the internal symptoms, but the external ones is, you know, people can be angry for no reason. They can have no energy, mood swings. They're all symptoms of stress. You can be, because cortisol, another thing of Judith's, as we know, cuts, cortisol closes down your prefrontal cortex, which is why, you know, when you're super stressed, you can't think straight. And so when you're stressed, as I say, you know, your brain doesn't function as well. You've got slow thinking. You can also feel helpless. You can feel hopeless. So those kind of emotional things. And then moving on to the physical things, which again can be a sign of stress. You can be tired all the time. This is the person that wakes up. Doesn't matter if they have early nights, go to bed at, you know, 9 o'clock. They wake up tired. They're always tired. They never have any energy. People have chest pains, they have constipation. Lots of people get muscle pains, they get bad backs, they get headaches, they get gut problems. And I have treated a lot of IBS and Crohn's, indigestion, allergies, stomach problems. They can all be symptoms of stress, all of them. And unfortunately, you know, here in London or here in England, NHS doctors just don't have time to, you know, to ask about the stress that people are living with. So, yeah, all of those are symptoms, you know, and then it can go to the next level, if you like, where actually somebody's so, you can lead to alcoholism, breakdown of marriages, people lose their jobs simply because they're just not able to function properly. So those are all symptoms, but as I say, very often they don't get picked up, or the person doesn't realize it until that first visit to a doctor, and then they kind of, you know, then they get a diagnosis and they get pills, and then they have to start thinking about, okay, and maybe a few things begin to come home in terms of how they're living their life. Yeah. So many physical things have stress behind them, and that's, you know, the list I've just given you is very wide. You know, and they're emotional, they are physical, and you know, the two go together. So yeah, it's and most people will have one system in the body that is their weak point. So for some people, when they're very stressed, they will get, let's say, painful joints. They'll have a bad back or a bad neck. Other people, when they're stressed, they'll have gut problems. They might get bloating, or you know, their gut doesn't function properly. So we all have our own little system, our own body system of how we manifest stress. Not everybody, but it's very common that people have your body has a preferred way of, or you might say, that's most susceptible to stress. Yeah. Does that make sense? I mean, when you're just got my microphone, sorry. You know, that's a way that you can start recognizing, oh yeah, this doesn't feel right. It's like a warning sign, you know, it's like the canaries in the mines. You can start doing something about it when you recognize those signs.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I know when my part of the body is triggering this signal. And I'm glad we have the recording. As you mentioned, so many useful insight about the warning side. Maybe there's a use to listen 2 or 3 times to get them all in my head.
Well, and the thing is, everybody's different, and so I think it's really about, you know, once you know that your body's going to show up with symptoms, is to maybe just, you know, ask yourself the question, what happens to me? What physically happens to me when I get stressed? You know, do I get out of breath? Do I feel overwhelmed? Or do I get snappy with my children, angry with my partner? Or, you know, those are just little things that you can start to notice.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I continue in the book, and there's one word which came directly to my attention because it's something I liked, which is the word resilience. And you have 2 definitions, which I'm going to read from the book. So your first definition of resilience is our ability to thrive in spite of the stresses that life throws at us. And another definition, we can bounce back in spite of the stresses we have to cope with. Will you comment on these definitions?
Yeah, I'd love to. I could put it another way, but I believe our resilience is the result of well-managed stress. When we know how to manage stressful situations, and of course, stress is going to be different for everybody. You know, what stresses you might not stress me, and vice versa. But when we recognize what stresses us, and we've learned how to handle it, you know, that's like the foundation of having resilience. So yeah, I have this little saying: resilience is a result of well-managed stress. You can't be resilient if you can't manage your stress. So yeah, does that answer the question? Does that?
Yes. Yeah, I think
that. when you sort out, you know, what stresses you, etc., and you can learn ways to deal with it, that's the beginning of resilience. The other thing about resilience is, because our bodies are primed and wired to adapt and change, there is another view of resilience, that when we learn to go through difficult situations, we get better at handling them in a way. We kind of build our resilience through having stress as well. You know, if we lived a life that was absolutely perfect, I don't know any of these amazing people that do, but you might say they probably wouldn't have much resilience because they've never had to learn to be resilient. So the other side of stress is we first we need to manage it, but it also teaches us to be resilient as well at the same time.
Yeah, I like your quote, which is really resilience is well managed stress, and we can build upon it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, at this point in the conversation, I maybe want to make our audience aware. We're not going to answer the question directly afterwards. What we're going to do for any question you have is that we will gather them through the chat box. So feel free to ask question now in the chat box, and we will collect all of them. Marian will answer them offline or on the writing question and answer paper, and every one of you will receive all the answers later on with the recording and the material. Just that if you have any burning question, feel free to put any time in the chat box, and they'll get answered.
If we have time for one, Christian, I'm happy to answer one, just so that we have something. Let's see how
we'll see where we land with the timing at the end.
Yeah, let's see how the time goes exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh.
And
yeah, does that help with does that help in terms of answering the questions about resilience? Because it's a very good question, and I think we all need to build our resilience.
And the link between resilience and stress, which you really well explain. Which is I'm always looking this as a muscle that we can train.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And it needs practice. And if we can have some chunk of stress which we manage well and not too big a chunk, then we'll improve our resilience muscle.
Yeah, I like that. Resilience muscle. Thank you. I like that. That's a good one. I like that. Thank you.
Okay. And you have a process to deal with stress, which is the aware process. I like the name. Will you introduce it?
Absolutely. So basically, aware, A-W-A-R-E. So the A is for assess. So when I'm working with somebody, I often work with the wheel of life and get them to mark on the wheel of life, the areas of their life that are not working, so they can see kind of where the stresses are within their life. So we might look at relationships, we might look at money, work situations, social situations. So it's really assessing which area of your life has the most stress for you. So that's about assessing, because if you don't know what the problem is, then you can't work on it. So assessing is all about which part of your life do you want some stress tools to help you in. Obviously with Judith's work, it's much more, it's about work and all the situations at work that people face. So that's usually a big one for people, and it's a difficult boss. It's the people you work with that don't understand you, or you don't understand them. So there are loads of different situations within work. If you're in a board meeting and you're suddenly asked to explain something that you haven't done your homework on, how do you handle that? So there are lots of situations around work that come up. So the A is for assess, and the next one is for wake up, and that's literally to kind of wake up to your triggers. So you look at the areas, then you wake up to the triggers that cause you stress, and what your different responses are to them. So for some people, I don't know, giving a talk might be very stressful for one person, but to the next person it's not. So the wake up is actually to recognize what stresses you, because again, if you don't know what stresses you, you can't make any changes. And again, you're going to get some of that information from the body systems that I talked to you about, talked about earlier. And although I've divided them into sort of A, W, A, R, E, actually, of course, they're all, you know, they all overlap. And so the next one of analyzing is really about choices. So you recognize what your stress is, and then it's about analyzing the choices you make around stress. So, you know, do you go and hit the fridge for cookies as one way of responding to something that's happened? Or do you pick up the phone and talk to a friend about it? So I have a whole questionnaire, you know, different ways that people respond to stress. Those are, you know, or do you after work, do you always go to the wine bar and, you know, do you have a glass of wine? Or do you go to the gym? So I will share that when I was going through a lot of stress, I used to go to the gym. I actually, you know, I had an exercise addiction. That was my stress led me to having to over exercising and having an exercise addiction. So I'm very transparent about how I coped with it. But you know, that wasn't healthy. Exercise is good, but not to the degree that I did it. A biscuit's fine, but it's not okay to eat a whole tin of biscuits. A glass of wine is fine, but you know, there's a degrees to this. So, so as I say, this AWARE, they all kind of interlink, and you know, they're not really separate, but it's, I just like to kind of explain to people how I do what I do. So, you know, analyze how we actually cope with stress and have a big questionnaire of like examples that I've just given you, you know, hitting the fridge, the wine, the gym, whatever, or, you know, or do you go and write your gratitude journal, or do you ring up a friend? Do you ask for support, or do you actually go and bury your head in the sand and pretend the problem doesn't exist? So you have to know how you cope with stress to know how you can change it. And then, so that's AWA, and the R is for reset. And basically what reset is rewiring your sympathetic, your nervous system with resources. Because when we overreact and we have this cortisol production, you know, we're wiring ourselves up into being sympathetic dominant with a lot of cortisol running around the body. And so the reset is all about teaching people to have resources when they're stressed. Very much having resources that they can use in the moment. I have another little saying, which is, you know, until such time that you can put your yoga mat down in the boardroom, when that happens, you won't need this. But until such time that you can, we all need resources that we can use to help us with stress. So the reset is all about learning what to do in particular situations. So that's the reset. And then the E on the end is for embody. And that's literally embodying the changes, embodying those resources so they become part of you, they become part of how you react without even thinking about it. A lot of companies have a tick box exercise about stress. I've been talking to various companies recently, and they'll say, oh yeah, we have somebody that comes and does they come and give us information once a month, or they come and do a lunch and learn, and they tell us about stress. And my response to that is, well, how much? One of the things that I ask people is, so how much of that do people take on, and how much of that do they actually use in their everyday life? And my latest thing is, not latest, but I've just started asking quite a cheeky question really, is you've had somebody in to come and do stress management with you for 3 months. Can you tell me how effective, or in a year's time, are they still using what they learnt? Now, there's no point in getting anybody in, it's a waste of money to get anybody in doing stress management if you're not showing them how to have techniques and resources they can use that they can carry forward. And then the question comes up, which is a little bit more controversial, because I think sometimes people have this tick box attitude. We'll get somebody in to come and talk about stress, but actually, unless the managers know what's needed, then it's very difficult to really, design a stress program that's going to work. So I'm all about actually, I'm working with a colleague as well. We won't do anything without actually talking to the people that we're going to train and asking them what they need, because 9 times out of 10 the managers don't know. They think, oh, they need they need communication skills. Well, very often the communication skill problem probably starts higher up. So anyway, I'm a great believer in, if you're going to do stress management, you have to give people tools that they can use, that they can take away with them, that they can use in other areas of their life. So that's all about embodying it. And there's no point in getting anybody in if what they teach you isn't embedded a year later and isn't useful to that person. Otherwise, it's a waste of money.
Yeah,
I'm a bit forceful on that, but when I'm saying it, it's like, yeah, well, it is a waste of money, and actually you're not doing your employees any good if you're not actually giving them skills they can use.
Yeah, I like the embody part, and especially on top that it's useful and important. You've used an example in the book with Roger Federer. And as I'm a Swiss citizen, of course, I've picked up directly Roger. You've made the example that, do you think Roger just comes on the court and start serving? He's doing a lot of exercise on serving. In any training, in any configuration. And you need exercise, you need practice like crazy, to practice in order to be good on the court. And the same thing with stress. We talked about before that well-managed stress is resilience. So you need to practice. And I found this example of the serve of Roger Federer, and making this metaphor to the embodiment of stress solution, a really nice example.
Absolutely. He is just the epitome of the mind and the body being so finely tuned in what he's doing. That's why I love Roger Federer too, Christian. So it's just a joy to watch him, because he's so brilliantly coordinated and everything is finely tuned. I don't know what else to call it. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so it's all about embodying the resources so they become part of your life. So everything I do is like, I like teaching people techniques they can use, and I get them to do it. I give them homework to do.
Yes.
Because otherwise there's no point. There's absolutely no point in teaching anybody anything without actually, this thing about learning, see it, hear it, do it, feel it in your body, use all your senses to learn something, and then you will remember it. If you just see something, you don't. If you just read something, I'm exaggerating obviously, but if you can put all your 5 senses together to learn something, in particular learning techniques to handle stress, you will embody it, because it's that's the thing, it's a body experience. It's not just in your head. You require your whole body, and that's what I help people do. I help them recognize how their body, I'll say to somebody, as an example, I might say to somebody, I don't say to them, tell me how you feel. I'll say, how does your body do anger? Or how does your body do disappointment? Because those are very different kinds of questions, because I want people to realize that when they're angry, there's something going on in their body, and there's something going on when you're disappointed as well. So I work very much with the body, probably less with the brain, for people to start tuning in and connecting their body to their brains. I don't know how we're doing on time. But
we're fine.
So that's about embodying it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really like the question. Some deep thinking question.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you know, we could, I don't know, we could just have a little chat. Maybe
maybe just
if
before
everybody, you don't have to share anything, but maybe just think of one thing that's really upset. Don't think of anything major. Just think of a politician. I can think of one. Think of a politician who makes you annoyed or angry or upset. Just close your eyes. Think of the politician and just notice what happens in your body. It's just a really simple exercise to do. Just notice. And if you feel like sharing in the chat room, you know, common things that you might notice are your breathing changes. You might feel a part of your body contracting, getting smaller. Or you might feel a part of your body with more tension. Just notice what you notice. There isn't a right and there isn't a wrong. It's just noticing what you notice. Thinking of this this person that, you know, you don't think is great. That's a really lovely place just to start, noticing what your body does.
Yeah. We have an answer. I feel nauseous. My hands clench. My cheeks are getting hot.
Thank you. That's that's
another answer is faster breathing.
And that's just to take it back to conversational intelligence. Those are the changes that happen in your body just from thinking. Thinking, those are your thoughts. So now, you know, extrapolate that to the changes your body makes with words. You know, thoughts change our physiology as we've just experienced, and so do words. And that to me is everything that Judith was about. I've just added the body bit in even more. I think Judith did too, but yeah. Thoughts change your physiology and words change your physiology as well.
Yeah. Thank you for this exercise. And we will close the session with the last quote that you have in your article, which I'm going to read, which is, set peace of mind as your higher goal and organize your life around it, by Brian Tracy. And I give you the word.
Yeah, I mean, really, isn't that just such a lovely quote of his? You know, set peace as your highest goal. If peace, i.e. being able to handle stress, is your highest goal, you will learn to deal with stress. You know, if you want peace, somebody once said to me, one of my teachers, there's another nice thing I learned. Do you want peace or do you want to be right? And yeah, that's why I put that quote in there. I just think it's yeah, if we all wanted peace, and we really wanted peace, we would go for it. We would aim for it.
Great. Thank you, Marianne, very much for this great conversation, all those many insights about stress, resilience, your aware process, and many more. And I remember to every audience participant, if you have a burning question, just put it in the chat, such that we can have them and answer them and provide you the answer later on.
Yeah, I'm very happy when I don't know how it works. I think we're just going to explain. I will answer all the questions. It might take me a day or two, depending on how many there are, but I will answer everybody's question. And if you want to email me in response, please do. I love answering questions about stress and how to help.
Yes, we kind of feel it during this session that this topic is deep in your body, in your mind, and your soul.
Yeah, it is.
And it's really valuable to have this conversation with you. And I'm glad we have a recording to publish. And yeah, if people want more, there's more information in your article and they can connect with you. Yes.
Thank you so
Great.
much. It's been lovely chatting to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe I can pass over to Ute if you want to say some word about the next steps.
Yes, of course. So I collected the questions from the chat box. I organized them on a theme basis, for instance, around resilience, around the cortisol conversations, so that Marian knows in which context the questions came up. There was also, and I highly recommend, Marian, that you read the chat. There was also some interesting conversation going on around the capacity to deal with stress. And Eilish was saying, we were going actually through an example on how we can help each others out when we realize what are our talents and what other talent or what talents other people bring. And when we combine them, then we can reduce our personal stress levels. You know, one person offered to cook, the other to bake, one was bringing the wine. And so it was kind of looking at what are the talents of everyone and reducing the stress level of an individual. So coping mechanisms. There was also.
Have you saved the chat, Ute?
Yeah,
save it. Have you saved it?
I will save it for you, no problem.
Thank you.
So it's really interesting to see that conversation going on at the site. I think people were really happy when you did that little exercise with us, because they were asking, what can we do? How can we practice to cope with stress? So, and you gave us that exercise with the politician just as a teaser. And yeah, so you will get all of the questions from me, and then we'll come up with a PDF that I think Christian will make available on the collective website for you to retrieve from. And I will also share Marian's email address in the chat box in a minute, in the same way as the information around the next Regulars table taking place in January, on January 19th. And it's with Sonja Flass, chapter around inclusion and the brain. And I'm popping the link into the chat box as I'm speaking, trying to multitask, and I hope it will work. So you can register, you will not miss it. And we all wish you a wonderful Christmas time, free of stress, nice gliding over into the new year. And yeah, hope to see you then in January again for the next Regulars table, the first Regulars table in the new year. So that's my part. Ending over again to Christmas, to Christian, and not to Christmas, but to Christian and Marian for the last words, because it's your table and Christmas is coming. Yes.
Yes, everyone have a wonderful Christmas. Enjoy the time coming, and see you in January 19 at the next table.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, everybody.